All right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another evening of Cafe Scientifique. My name is Jon Willis, and I'll be your host this evening, also doubling up in the role as your speaker this evening. Saves on the bills a little bit. Let me give you kind of slip into my role as the moderator before the talk actually begins, just to give you a sense of what to expect from the talk, and also a little bit of advertisement as to what's coming up next week as well. So I'm just going to, when I actually start presenting, I'll be talking to you for probably about 40 minutes or so, and then I'll leave plenty of time at the end of the presentation for questions. Many of you are familiar with this online Cafe Sci format, and you'll know that you're free to ask questions at any time during the talk through the chat box. And certainly at the end of the talk, if you can post your questions to the chat box, I'll then be able to read them, paraphrase them to you guys in the audience, and then hopefully answer them for you as well. This talk is being recorded, and if you want to watch it again, or if you want to recommend it to any of your friends, you can send them to YouTube, and our channel name is UVic Cafe Sci, and you can actually see all of the talks there, quite a growing number that we've presented, pardon me, since starting with the online presentations. And just a quick heads up that there will be another presentation this time next week, same time, same link, and I believe I sent out the details of all of those to you today on the email exploder. So hopefully you'll have the details for that. I just don't have them in my head at the moment. And so, with no further ado, I guess let's begin this evening's presentation. And as you know, our speaker is, well, me. So let me start by sharing the screen with you, and I'll give you an introduction to my talk. So let me just start that going. All right, so hopefully you can all see my first slide now, and it's almost a summary slide of the talk that you're going to see this evening. So the title is Swimming with Stromatolites, One Astrobiologist Journey to Mars via Western Australia. And this is going to be, I guess, an idiosyncratic talk is the best way to put it, in that it's going to be part science, but part, I guess, lockdown reminiscence of the joy of traveling to new and interesting places. And I hope you'll also be able to share with me some of the joy at reminiscing at the places we used to be able to visit, and hopefully we'll be able to again soon. And let me just kind of explain the title a little bit. These journeys that I've been undertaking the past few years, of which this I'm going to tell you about this evening is one particular one, are all kind of being grouped together in a new book I'm writing that has the provisional title Swimming with Stromatolites. And really, this book is kind of explores what astrobiologists do on a day-to-day basis, okay, and what it looks like when they go out into the field and perform astrobiology as a science. And partly because I enjoy doing these trips, but also to give it kind of a strong first-person narrative, I'm the guinea pig. I'm the one actually going out and doing all of these journeys and then telling you, the reader, what it's like to actually go there and do that science and why the science is important. So if you like, this evening's presentation is almost like a microcosm, one story from the book that I thought it would be neat to share with you guys. And I'm not going to go around the screen and tell you what each of these is about, because I'll actually encounter a lot of these images as we go through the talk. So I guess let me start by just setting the stage. And well, let's talk about one word in the title, astrobiologist, or if you like, the science of astrobiology. What exactly is that? What does an astrobiologist do? Now, hopefully you can all see my second slide here. And contrary to popular opinion, this is not what an astrobiologist does. We don't battle aliens or even killer robots on Forbidden Planet. But what we do in astrobiology is, well, we're interested in what are the prospects for discovering life beyond Earth. And by definition, that means alien life. You can call it extraterrestrial if you want, but we're basically looking for life beyond Earth. Now, we haven't found it yet. Okay, so clearly it's not, we're not just going to stumble on it. We need to think about strategies. How are we going to go out there to discover life? What places are we going to go to? Where are we going? And so one part of astrobiology is actually conducting a census, if you like, of where are the best places to look. Okay. And then once you've actually got an idea of where are the best places to go and look, then you have to think about the technical exercise as to how you're going to travel there and what scientific experiments you're going to perform when you actually get to these locations, these potential habitats out there, whether they be in the solar system or whether they be beyond the solar system. Okay? And so that's pretty much the science of astrobiology in a nutshell. Looking for life beyond Earth, but in these early stages where we're really at the beginning of this process, not even near to the end of the beginning, is finding the possible locations. Where are we going to look and learning about how we're going to look? And that's part of what this story is actually going to be about. But before we actually get down to literally to Earth and see what on Earth does Western Australia have to do with the search for life in the universe and its possible links to Mars, let me just give you a brief quick tour of astrobiology to try and kind of bring things back down to Earth. And this is kind of just a neat image here. And this image is what's called the Hubble Ultra Deep Field. It's one of the deepest images of the night sky ever taken. And it's impressive because when you point the Hubble Space Telescope at a blank piece of the night sky and take an image for a time, you see exactly what Carl Sagan expected, told us we should expect to see: billions and billions of stars, billions and billions of galaxies. Okay, and so what we see is a universe populated by galaxies, and we think, wow, a universe that big, there must be every possible chance of finding life in some corner of it. And mathematically, you're right, but let me kind of bring you back down, not to Earth, but to the Milky Way. There's quite a bright yellow galaxy in the bottom right-hand corner of this image. And I'm just going to zoom in now in the presentation. And what we can do is, I just want to pretend quickly that that's our Milky Way, that's our home. Okay? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight, imagine where we might live in that Milky Way galaxy. I'm just going to put a red circle on there, out in one of the spiral arms of the Milky Way. Now that marks our location. The size of that red circle is important as well, because I'm not going to talk about the whole field of astrobiology tonight. I'm going to talk about something very, very much closer to home. But if you talk about every search we've ever done for life out there in the universe, okay, it basically fits within that red circle. So this is what I mean when I talk about astrobiology is very much at the start of a journey. When we think about the, almost, unimaginably large size of the universe, we don't have to even think about that because we can't look over that large region yet. We're limited to very much closer to home. Now, in a couple of slides' time, I'll get even closer to home when I say a lot of the modern focus of astrobiology exploration is on the solar system. So this is the arena, this is the scope of astrobiology. I guess I should give another quick introduction as to, well, I showed those movie posters as to examples of alien life in movies, but this is actually an example much closer to home as to what we might actually be looking for when we go out there and conduct our search for alien life. Now, this is, some of you might recognize this image. This is Great Prismatic Spring in Yellowstone National Park. And you can see this crystal clear water that's bubbling up at incredibly high temperature, having been in contact with hot rocks several hundred meters below the actual surface here. That's where this water is heated, and that water is rich in minerals, bubbles up to the surface, and is then found at this wonderful lake. To get a sense of the scale, you can see there's this kind of gray band that you can see coming in from the bottom left corner. So they're going across the bottom of the image from left to right, just snaking off at the bottom edge there on the right-hand side. I don't know what it looks like on your screens. On my screen, I'm seeing the whole presentation. I don't know what it looks like through Blackboard. You can just see a human figure on the left-hand edge of that walkway. Okay, so you get a sense of the scale here. The color that people talk about with great prismatic spring, these browns, oranges, and yellows that you can see around the periphery of the lake, those are all species of high temperature loving bacteria and microbes. Okay, they are single-celled organisms that are perfectly adapted to what to us is a very hostile environment. But these are examples of what we're going to look for in our search for alien life, at least initially in the solar system. It's going to be basic single-celled life forms, but compared to us, if we like to call ourselves complex creatures, relatively simple biology, simple biochemistry. Okay, we're starting at the bottom of the food chain, if you like. But depending upon the environment, this might be all there is. Now, I did tell you as well that part of the science of astrobiology at these early stages is working out where should we look. We can't afford, we haven't got enough money to go everywhere and do everything. So we've got to work out where is going to give us the best chance for success. Okay. And so what we need is, well, we need to ask the question, well, where, at least say in the solar system, do we see the conditions in which this basic kind of life could survive? What does this basic kind of life that we see on Earth, what would it need to survive elsewhere in the solar system? Maybe that will give us clues as to where might be good places to start looking. Okay, and if I kind of summarize it for you here, what's our recipe for basic life? It actually turns out it's a recipe for all life as well. But it turns out you need liquid water. Okay, that is the medium in which the biochemistry that we call life occurs. So water is the environment in which life happens. Okay, you also need molecules containing carbon atoms. Okay, a very simplistic description of the biochemistry of life is describing it as the oxidization of carbon. Okay, an awful lot of life on Earth. It's always interesting to find examples that don't do this. An awful lot of life on Earth, though, finds the energy to perform life functions from the oxidization of carbon. Carbon is part of the structure of living organisms. It's the structure of our cells. And so these molecules containing carbon atoms you can think of as the raw material of life. And then, of course, as well, you need energy. You need energy to make stuff happen, to do that rearranging of the carbon atoms that happens in this aqueous, water-rich environment. That's the three things we need to come together. Now, I've given bits of this talk once before. I actually gave it at a high school, and so to try and make it more relevant for the students there, I talked about, well, what's actually your recipe for advanced life that you could write in those 3 points as well. And I pitched to them that maybe it was coffee, internet access, and some form of device, right? At least they agreed with some of these, not all of them perhaps. But it's interesting as well that you could say, is this a recipe for life in lockdown, for getting us through each day? Certainly internet access definitely is, and some kind of device for connecting to it. Excuse me, tea keeps me going through all of these presentations. All right, so going back though, if we can find locations in the solar system where we see these three conditions met, okay, that's not telling us that life is hosted there. It tells us life might be hosted there. It might be a habitat for life. And so it makes it onto our list of places that are worth going to, okay? And so what we have to do now then is to just look at this image of the solar system and ask, well, where do we think those conditions are met? Now, I haven't got my pointer. Well, I don't think you guys can see my pointer when I'm using it in this mode. So I'm going to have to just describe what we can see here. So in the center of this image, you can see the great fiery ball of gas that is the sun. And then coming from the sun out on the right-hand side, you can see 4 planets. You can see Mercury, Venus, Earth with its own moon, and Mars. And then sort of going outwards from there, you see this band of pebbles that is the asteroid belt. Then the outer solar system, that's represented on the left of the image. There you see Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. If you've good eyesight, and depending upon what the quality of the image in your browser is, you can also see Pluto just poking in at the top left of the image there. I particularly like still to use this image because it's almost as if Pluto still wants to sneak in as a planet and not merely the dwarf planet that is the current name that humans give it in this present epoch. Okay. Now, where we're going to go to this evening, we're actually going to spend a fair bit of time this evening talking about the planet Mars. Okay, so that's relatively easy to find. You just go back to where Earth is, third planet from the Sun, and then go one further out. Okay, in some ways, I'm going to talk about Mars as our twin planet Earth this evening. Not a twin in terms of its present day properties, but we're going to stretch our minds back, both on Earth and the planet Mars, about 3.5 billion years. And the real link we're going to form in this story is that 3.5 billion years ago, evidence tells us that that planets Earth and Mars may have looked quite similar in terms of their surface condition. Okay, what that means is, what was it like on Earth? Well, there was an atmosphere, there were large bodies of liquid water, there was energy in the form of sunlight to actually generate the conditions in which arose the first life on Earth. Okay, now that we see in the evidence, we also see evidence for the same bodies of liquid water, possibly an atmosphere on the planet Mars. What we don't know is whether there was life in that epoch. Okay, now that's a valid question for astrobiology, not just the existence of life today, but did life ever exist on the planet Mars? And so that's going to be one theme story we're going to tell. Did life arise independently on Mars, let's say 3.5 billion years ago? Well, the whole reason, I like to sort of give you guys the punchline at various points in the talk. The whole reason for going to Western Australia on planet Earth is because there we're going to encounter rocks that are 3.5 billion years old. On Mars, 3.5 billion years ago, that's when we saw the same kinds of conditions of large bodies of liquid water. You can call them seas or oceans if you want to, and possibly an atmosphere that enabled them to be stable over time. What we don't know, though, is whether there was life in those Martian rocks. We see life in those Earth rocks, and I'm going to show you wonderful examples of that. The big question is, can we answer the same question about Mars rocks? Okay, that's really the link I'm going to follow in this particular story. If, as I sometimes do, I was trying to fit the whole of astrobiology into one talk, well, I'd spend a little bit of time talking to you about not just the prospect for finding ancient evidence of life, but modern evidence of life. And for that, I had to take you to the top left of the diagram, and there I'd have to tell you about Jupiter and Saturn. In particular, I'd spend just a moment telling you about the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. And this is a wonderful image that shows the moons of the solar system. This particular image is good because all of the moons and planet Earth are shown to scale. This is all the right scale. And so it's going to be a whole other evening's presentation where I to tell you about, well, you go across the top and see Jupiter, and then look down the column, Io and Europa. That would be a wonderful place to tell you about. And similarly, go one across to Saturn and the tiny moon Enceladus. Those are whole talks in themselves. But I thought this evening I'd focus on the link between Mars, Western Australia, and early life. Okay. Now, what does Mars look like today? Well, this is a wonderful image of what modern Mars looks like. And this is a selfie taken by the Curiosity rover on Mars. It must have taken this image about 6 years ago now, maybe a little bit more than that. And this image that you're seeing on your screen does no justice whatsoever to the actual image that you can download by Googling it. Right? So if you Google Curiosity selfie and actually try and get an image like this, it's about 3,000 by 4,000 pixels. It's absolutely huge. And what that means is you can actually zoom in and you can see astrobiology in action. Okay, and this Curiosity is an astrobiologist, just happens to be a robot astrobiologist that is controlled by humans on Earth, but is doing the same things that an astrobiologist would want to do were they in person on the surface of planet Mars. It's exploring the rocks. It's exploring the mineralogy and the chemistry of the rocks, for the history of how they were laid down, and that is the geological clue that tells us about the conditions on early Mars. Most of these rocks you can actually see on the surface of Mars are ancient. Mars is not a young planet. It doesn't have a young surface. There are a couple of regions where there's examples of fresh volcanism, but they are tiny. Most of Mars is ancient. And so when you pick up all of those ancient rocks that are scattered around Curiosity there, you are hearing the story of ancient Mars. And it turns out when you go to Western Australia, well, that's where you find rocks of similar age on the surface of the Earth. You can read the same stories there. I said you can zoom in on this image. The point of zooming in on the image is you can see every grain of dust. You can see everything on this robotic rover, and you get a sense that this is really actually happening. Okay, and it's a wonderful act of the imagination. If you're ever out and happen to see the planet Mars, to look there and realize this probe is on that planet right now and is controlled by scientists at the Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena. Okay, come next year, 2021, there'll be another rover in this class, Perseverance, in a separate part of Mars, doing a very similar job to that which we see here. That's going to become sort of part of the story we're going to come back to at the very end of the presentation. Okay. Now, just let me show you a quick video. I'm always wary as to how these videos look when we're broadcasting across the internet. I'm going to show just a quick video that is not taken as a video. It's taken as a series of time-lapse images from a navigation camera on the front of this Curiosity rover. And every time they want to move to some new location, they always take images of the local environment. And what they did was they stitched these together to actually give a sense of what it's like to move around on the surface of Mars and explore it. Let me just play that for you now. I'm not sure if I have any control over your volume on your computer, but I'm going to try and keep the volume of the music here under control. But just to let you know that there's going to be perhaps a blast of music as this starts playing. Now, I have to sit through the whole 4 or 5 minutes of that video because it's wonderful watching, you know, what real exploration actually looks like. But as time is ticking on in the presentation, I don't want to spend too long looking at that. But that's what modern astrobiology actually looks like. Okay. Now, of course, not being there in person does have some limitations, okay? We don't have physical samples to work with, and we can only, you know, use the results of onboard instruments carried by Curiosity, okay? So there is actually a lot of value in going to places that show similar rocks and to ask similar questions that we would of the Mars rocks, but to do it on planet Earth, okay? This allows us to train up and actually work out, well, what do we need to put on the next round of rovers that go to the planet Mars? What kind of instruments do they need to have? And so that's now where we change the scene completely. No Martian dustscape. Now we're going to go back and take a look at Australia. Okay. Now, this is the good old days of, you know, long-haul international travel. So if it were possible today, you could jump on the plane from Vancouver and fly to Sydney, then in Indiana Jones style, hop across to Perth, and then from Perth, it's only about a 2-hour journey up to the northwest of the country to a place called Port Hedland. We can kind of zoom in there. And then you've got Port Hedland is just up there in the top left on the ocean there. This whole region you're seeing highlighted in red is what's called Pilbara County in northwest Australia. And it's useful to sort of look at this red region because certainly beyond it, but really all of the rocks that are poking up above the surface of the Earth in this part of Australia older than about 2.5 billion years, some going as old as about 3.5 billion years old. This is the part of the world where you can go to and see the story of Earth's ancient rocks and, you know, what they tell us. Port Hedland itself, it's a very interesting place to go and visit because the reason why it exists is it's an iron ore processing town. So these ancient rocks, 2.5 billion year to 3 billion year old rocks, are incredibly rich in iron ore deposits. And so there's a steady traffic from the mines that go along these roads to the port at Port Hedland, where then ore is shipped out to processing facilities all the way around the world. Okay, and it's interesting because when I took my plane all the way up there, I thought, leaving at 5 a.m. from Perth Airport, and I thought there's going to be no one on the plane, no one whatsoever. And I get there, and there's a line of vehicles stretching out of the airport, dropping people. And I get to the plane, I'm pretty much the last person on. It's completely full, and everybody is wearing high visibility jackets and overalls. They're all mine workers going up to start their 2-week shift, and I was the only astrobiologist on the aeroplane that particular day. Okay, but when you get there, you get your hire car and type in your GPS coordinates, and then you're basically going to go along this road to a place called Marble Bar. And then the actual locations I'm going to talk to you about are about 60 kilometers just outside of Marble Bar. So just to give you a sense of scale here, from Port Hedland to Marble Bar, that's about 300 kilometers driving. And then we're going to be visiting some of the places just around Marble Bar. Okay. This is just a panorama of what the road generally looks like at any given moment during that day, completely empty. You're surrounded by these pulverized redstone deserts. With off in the distance, you've got these low hills. And it's worth emphasizing, everything you're seeing, all these low hills, all of this desert, is made of ancient rocks. You are literally traveling through time when you travel along these roads. Okay. Is an example of how the iron ore gets from the mines to Port Hedland in these road trains. I don't know if you can count there. That's a truck pulling 1, 2, 3, 4 containers of iron ore, and these drivers are, I don't want to say merciless, but they're very well practiced on the road. So they go at about 120 kilometers an hour, whether it's a paved surface or an unpaved surface. And you can see how long they are, right? You know that the roads are going to be pretty quiet, so overtaking is going to be a fairly safe operation. But still, well, it was interesting. I would not like to install Flash right now. Sorry about that, guys. I don't know whether that actually did the sharing at all. But I'm just going to have to restart my keynote presentation for you. Let me do that. It was actually kind of handy because I was wondering how long I'd been talking for, and so it gave me the opportunity for a quick time check. Let me go back to sharing applications. Let me fire up the application window again and hit play. And there we go. There's a road train again. So what I was actually trying to say there is overtaking. I mean, I'm a typical Victorian driver, right? So overtaking these guys at 120 kilometers an hour on dirt roads when they're that long was a test of nerve. Let me just leave it at that. There's my vehicle. Actually, you can get 2 types of vehicle from the from Hertz at Port Hedland. You can get these guys. It doesn't give you a good sense of scale, but this is about the size of an armored personnel carrier. And or you can get a pickup truck that's rigged for mine operations. So this is what I actually had. How did I know where to find everything? Well, I'll show you the book in a moment that one of my colleagues had written, and it's full of GPS coordinates of all the interesting geology of this area. And so before leaving, I typed all of these coordinates into my GPS as waypoints, and then I'd set my GPS to go off when I got within, I think it was 200 meters of every waypoint. Okay, and thinking, great, then I'll be able to stop and actually find the rock or the vista that's going to help me tell the story of this amazing landscape. What I didn't realize is, and I should have done the maths before I left home, is that when I'm traveling at 120 kilometers an hour, I'm covering 200 meters every 6 seconds. So every time that my GPS alarm went off, I basically had 6 seconds to stop from 120 kilometers an hour to 0 if I was going to have a chance of finding the thing I was actually looking for. And I actually got fairly well practiced at it. And you can also see, the main story, that the roads were always empty. I saw very few vehicles out there on these roads. And so my erratic driving was, I guess, forgivable in that sense. Oh, this is just another quick side. I wanted to really give you guys a sense of what it's like out there what do you see when you're driving along the road? Okay. Well, my GPS was hilarious. I typed in the coordinates, and it chimed up, and the voice told me turn right in 300 kilometers. So I figured it was going to be a pretty linear journey. You're told, obviously, to look out for kangaroos and emu on the road. What you're not told to look out for, it's a pity we're not here in person, because I could ask you guys to actually try and guess what's in the top right. The sense of scale doesn't help here, but what you're looking at here is looks like a rock that's about 8 feet tall, and it turns out that's a termite nest. And that's pretty much, apart from the trees, the only thing that pokes up above the landscape. And so that's actually, the termites build these huge rock formations because inside that allows them to keep a stable temperature from the desert heat. I should say, I guess, well, the bottom image is telling you that I was actually going to Australia's hottest town. How hot was it? So I was there in a July, which is the middle of their winter, and probably at the end of the day, about 5 o'clock in the evening, just as the sun was going down, it was about 35 degrees Celsius, and that's a typical midwinter day. In summertime, around about January, February, be registering about 50 degrees Celsius as their typical daytime temperature. So I was fortunate that my trip coincided with the middle of winter. And so then I get to my destination, which is Marble Bar. And I have to show you these images. So if I just told you what I found when I got there, you wouldn't believe it. So here are the images. This is the barman at the Marble Bar, the Ironclad Hotel. That's where I stayed for a couple of nights. And so I go in there to check in, and he's feeding a couple of joeys there that have been adopted when their mother was killed in a road accident. So he's looking after them. Unfortunately, I guess these road accidents are fairly common, because when I went camping in other parts of Australia, I'd find lots of adopted joeys that seem to be quite happy being looked after by humans. But it's sad to realise that there's quite a few orphaned joeys out there. It's a pretty simple town, must be about 100, 150 people, and it's. Let me just see what the next image is going to show you. This is why Marble Bar is called Marble Bar. Okay, there's a river that runs on the outskirts of town, the Kungun River, and across it, barring it, is this huge, essentially, what have we got here? Limestone and jasper deposit with bits of marble actually going through it, that's tilted at this angle. This particular slab must be about 8 to 10 feet high, and this is the big chunk of marble that bars the river, hence the whole name of Marble Bar. And so, although this is not part of my story of early life on Earth, it's just amazing, some of the geology here. This is actually an image I took of the guidebook I was using, just resting on the marble of the Marble Bar. You can't quite see who it's written by, but it's co-written by a professor at the University of New South Wales called Martin van Kranendonk, who is quite a well-known researcher into the history of early Earth and life on early Earth. He's even had an IMAX movie made about him. And he's written, well, for me as a scientific geek, this is a perfect guidebook. You can't buy it in shops, you can't buy it in Amazon. You actually purchase it from the Geological Society of Western Australia. But I bought myself a copy, and this is what actually took me on my journey. So if any of you actually want to repeat any of these experiences in Western Australia, feel free to email me, and I'll send you the reference to the book. It's an absolute classic from my point of view. Now, before I start this next one, let me tell you about the next day. So the next day, I got in my armored personnel carrier and drove about 60 kilometers south of Marble Bar to one of these GPS coordinates from Martin's book. Now, the reason I was going to this particular place is because this is really ground zero for early life on Earth. I was going to visit some rocks that contain the earliest evidence for life on Earth. To get there, you have to drive on the unpaved road for about 60 kilometers until your GPS chirps into life and tells you it's time to turn off. I then found an overgrown dirt track that I think had last been used about 4 years ago, and that's why having the big Jeep was pretty helpful. So you drive what feels like about 4 or 5 kilometers across country. The little track gets a little bit better once you're on it for a while, and then you reach a small area of flat ground with no rocks that is the car park. from there, you kind of grab your um, backpack with water and food, maybe your personal locator beacon as well, if you're worried about twisting an ankle out there in the outback. And you head out with your GPS to find this one rock that is pictured in his book. Now, when I got out of the car, I took this panorama. I'm going to see if the video works for you. This is actually a bit of a soundtrack of wind blowing in the background, but this is what the whole landscape looks like. That beige stuff is spinifex. That's basically a armor-piercing grass, and then these small trees. But this whole landscape it's not big, sharp, jagged mountains because these hills are 3.5 billion years old. You can just see the car down there at the edge of the gully, and this is the landscape. Every outcrop of these hills tells a story of planet Earth 3.5 billion years ago. So I went off in search of my rock, and I can't actually describe to you the sense of surprise and relief. And I found it. This is the rock I was looking for. This is a 3.5 billion year old chunk of rock. It's what's referred to as it's sandstone. Some of it is been lightly heated by temperature and pressure over the intervening billions of years. So it's technically it's what's known as a chert, and you can see these wavy lines are preserved in the actual structure of the rock. So the rock was actually laid down in these rock layers, and that's one of the key features I was there to see, because that's actually the earliest evidence to your eye that this might be early life Earth. And we actually think these sediments are trapped in this rock by the action of basically microscopic bacteria and another type of microbe that we call archaea. Right. So essentially, you're seeing the geological leftovers of a bacterial mat. Okay, you can sometimes see these at on the bottom of muddy ponds or this kind of thing, where there's a kind of a carpet of fluffy strands growing on the bottom of a stagnant pond. That's another example of a bacterial mat. Luckily, I can actually, in a couple of slides' time, show you what these guys actually look like today, because the modern descendants of these creatures are still living in Western Australia. Okay, now there are many ways that Mother Nature can lay down wavy lines in rocks. Okay, I visited another museum in northern Russia where there's actually a beach, a fossilized beach that's preserved from 2 billion years ago. And they have this huge slab, it's about the size of the room in which I'm sitting at the moment, that contains all the sandy ripples as if they were laid down yesterday. So Mother Nature can lay down, wavy lines in rock to confuse you if you don't ask additional questions. And I'll ask them additional questions of these rocks in just a moment. Getting a bit closer, actually, I poured some water on these rocks to give you a sense of, to bring out the relief on them. Now, the structure you're actually looking at here, this is more of the sandstone. Imagine if you took an egg carton and turned it upside down. That's the kind of what the structure originally looked like. And it's all been buried over and then exposed by erosion. And so imagine what you're seeing here, kind of cross sections cutting down layer by layer through this egg carton-like structure. Okay, and then there's my hand there for scale that kind of gives you another impression here. And even to touch these rocks was quite incredible, because you're reaching out, not only touching something that's 3.5 billion years old, which is interesting in itself, but this is, effectively, these are our ancestors, right? Maybe not direct ancestors, but, it's not an impossible conjecture, but that, there is a continuous line of cell division and evolution that links us today with creatures like this 3.5 billion years ago. Okay, and pretty much within 100 million years or so, this is as early as the evidence gets. This is the first life on Earth. Remember what I told you we're looking for? Simple bacteria-like single-celled creatures that are able to process energy. In this case, we think they might have been photosynthetic creatures that used, sunlight to actually power their body chemistry. This is, if you like, astrobiology on Earth. Okay. Now, one reason we can be kind of certain that these are, the structures we claim to be formed by sort of colonies of bacteria in these mat-like structures is, well, two reasons. One is you can take very detailed, high resolution, basically electron microscopy images of thin slices of rock taken from these samples. And essentially, when you take electron micrographs of them, which is what we're seeing images of here, and then in this case for this publication, they sketched their impression of what they're seeing in these electron micrographs, these electron microscope images, they're claiming to see long filaments of segmented structures that are basically the same size in terms of microns as what we call today cyanobacteria, okay, which are also known as blue-green algae or blue-green bacteria that are basically long chains of photosynthetic bacteria. This is the whole base of the food chain on planet Earth today, and we think we're seeing evidence for that this microscopic scale in these Australian rocks. These particular ones come from what's called the apex chert. It's something I'm probably not going to have much time to go into, but there is a debate in the community because that's one location. But this separate location, this is one that's called the Strelly Pool Chert. All of these are in this same Pilbara County in northwest Australia. Here we're seeing what people think are evidence of cell walls. Have actually been highlighted by these dotted lines with actually chunks of pyrite, iron sulfide, embedded in them. And the authors of this particular paper think they're seeing actually sulfur metabolizing bacteria in these 3.5 billion year old rocks. Okay, so this is the kind of evidence one really needs. Not just, if I go back here, these large scale images where you see the patterns of the mat, but also evidence of individual cells. Now, the complicated thing, of course, that I would love to go into, but time doesn't permit me, is the team that produced these results think that these guys' work false and is just actually showing mineral artifacts. And people who did this particular work think that these fossils are simply mineral artifacts as well. It's more than just academic one-upmanship. What it really tells us is that we're working at the real cutting edge of a particular subject, and the data is not yet at the level where it is unambiguous. Okay, it is ambiguous, meaning that different teams can look at the same data and come up with different conclusions. Okay, I think there is evidence of early life in these images I'm showing you, early cellular life, right? But I wouldn't be telling you the whole story if I said that everybody agrees. There's a little bit of academic rivalry going on here at the very earliest evidence of life on Earth. Now, where am I going to take you to next? Let me just take you a couple of hundred kilometers north. This is still in Western Australia. This is Shark Bay in Western Australia. These are the direct modern descendants of those mat-like colonies that you saw in those ancient rocks. These are what we call living stromatolites. Okay, I should actually have told you earlier. Stromatolite simply means a fossil that consists of those tiny wavy lines superimposed on the rocks, okay, layer upon layer of bacterial growth. And this is what a stromatolite looks like today. It looks like a whole series of rock pillars, maybe like a kind of Australian giant's causeway, if you like. Each of these pillars is like a condominium, a condo, that grows from the ground up each year, layer by layer of these bacteria, and the bacteria essentially produce a kind of a mucus that lets those filamentary strands weave into this mat-like structure, but it also traps sediment. And that's what actually builds up the structure of these mounds. And then as each layer lithifies, basically becomes harder and harder, they then put a new layer on top and on top. That's how they actually grow up. Okay, and so that's, you know, powerful evidence that's often cited to say that, okay, we think we're seeing those structures we see in 3.5 billion year old rocks. I think we see them in rocks today. Okay, let me just take a brief moment to stop sharing. I'm just going to do another quick time check. Okay, I've got about 5 minutes left, so let me just fire this up once again. I just wanted to make sure I know how long I've got for just this last section. Let me just share this with you again. Thanks for bearing with me. Okay, let's go back. Shark Bay. So I will tell people where these places are. So yeah, this is Hamlin Pool, which is at the southern end of Shark Bay. That's also on that northwest Australian coast. It's another incredible place to visit. You can't but stand in front of these structures and feel like you've been transported in a time machine back 3.5 billion years. Because this is, if you imagine superimposing upon the horizon there some high shield volcanoes like Mauna Loa or Mauna Kea on the big island of Hawaii around the horizon there, that's pretty much what we think the environment in this part of the world looked like 3.5 billion years ago. So it's a very powerful experience to stand at this particular location and form that link between the fossils that you've just seen and these living creatures today. Now, the story to Mars, I guess, so I've done Western Australia. Let me take you back to Mars. This is a paper now that's, I guess it's 20 years old, although I can still remember the day it came out, because let's just read the title quickly. Search for past life on Mars, possible relic biogenic activity in the Martian meteorite Allen Hills 84001. So that particularly meteorite that's shown in the top right here, that's about a 2-kilogram lump of Martian rock that was found in the Allen Hills region of Antarctica in 1984. It's the first sample they got from that particular area. That's labeled 001. It's old. It's just around about 4 billion years old. So this is a chunk of Mars that's come to us, ejected from another meteorite impact on the surface of Mars. It flies around the inner solar system, hits Earth, and we collect it. When the scientists looked inside here, they thought they saw the same kind of fossil evidence that we claim we're seeing in the oldest Earth rocks. And there's a picture here in the bottom right that purports to be one of these filamentary structures, okay, similar to the kind of filamentary structure I just showed you in the Earth rocks. It hasn't satisfied the scientific community. It never did. The scale of that image is about 10 times smaller than the scale of the image I showed you a couple of slides ago, and it really, begs the question: is that big enough to actually be a living organism? But essentially, to give you the best explanation, analysis of this meteorite, gave us some lines of evidence that could be interpreted as life. They call it biogenic activity, okay? But equally, it could be interpreted as coming from non-biological chemistry as well, okay? So we think there's plausible explanations for what's going on here. But it planted a seed of why don't we actually go and do this on Mars, okay? And that's really the idea of some of the current missions to Mars now, is not to wait for a meteorite to hit planet Earth, but to go to Mars to collect our own samples of rocks from locations on the surface that we know exactly what their context is, and more than that, not to analyze them in situ on the rover, as I showed you, but to bring that rock back to Earth, where you can then subject it to every scientific test you can possibly think of, including the same kind of tests of microscopic imaging I showed you on those Earth rocks from Western Australia. And this is actually where, remember I told you there's a new rover that's going to land on Mars in 2021. It's going exactly here, pretty much the center of this image. And what you're seeing on this image, the larger feature is what's called the Jezero crater. But you can really see snaking in from the top left and coming in through the middle left to the center of the image is what we believe is an outflow channel that's caused by the act of the erosion of water. Even more than that, that water was carrying sediments and it deposited them in this delta-like formation, with the river delta-like formation, with this big impact crater superimposed on it. This is called the Aberswald Delta on Mars, okay? From our estimates of the age of what you're looking at here, we think this surface is between 3 and 3.5 billion years old. You can see evidence of liquid water flowing on Mars. This is our evidence that, that I've cited, that Earth and Mars were these, if you like, early twins, 3 to 3.5 billion years ago. They perhaps had the same conditions going on. We see the same kind of sedimentary rocks that we think we're seeing on Earth. And the question is, do those rocks hold evidence of life? Okay. And so the idea then is with this new rover, well, it's a multi-part mission, bringing samples back to Earth. In red, you've got the new rover that's going to land in 2021. It's going to actually go out and explore that river delta, and it's going to take physical samples of rock, and it's going to put them into a cache. It's going to save them for later. And then a later mission, this blue mission, is going to land in the vicinity, going to send out a little fetch and carry rover to go and just pick up the cache, do nothing else, and take it back to a mini Mars rocket. And that Mars rocket isn't going to go all the way back to Earth, but it's going to lift those samples from the surface of Mars to Mars orbit. It's going to then robotically link up with another spacecraft that's then going to do the return back to Earth. And then then we'll have the samples on Earth and we can analyze them. Okay. Now, let me actually see. And then once we have them back here, let me just skip back through here. These are the kinds of tests that we've performed on those oldest Earth rocks that I've shown you that will be what we're going to perform on those Martian rocks. And actually, many of the same researchers will be involved. The researchers in particular that did this study are already working with NASA to actually build up laboratory techniques that we're going to need to actually, hopefully, generate unambiguous results when we look at Martian rocks. But this is a cautionary tale, looking at this tale of two formations with two different scientific teams that don't agree with each other, that we may not get the clear answers we're hoping for yet. But we'll actually be going out there and doing astrobiology in action. So at that point, thank you very much. Let me stop sharing with you guys so I can actually go back and now, if you like, see you all. All right. 6:51. Phew! I couldn't see a clock at all during that presentation, so I was pleased that I actually managed to come in under time with you guys. If you have any questions, please feel free to start typing them into the chat window now. If you can't actually find the chat window, then you'll see on the bottom right of your browser there's a little magenta tab with a couple of arrows on it. Click open on there. And then you'll see along the bottom a line of icons. Click the one that looks like a speech bubble on the left, and then you can type in there and I'll actually see your message. Right. Fine, I'm going to drink a bit of tea. I guess I can multitask now while I'm waiting to see if there are any questions coming in. Oh, here we go. Right. Jenny Bartosik. Nice to hear you, Jenny. My 9-year-old daughter Ellie would like to know why liquid water no longer exists on Mars. That's a great question, right? It's not a long story, but so essentially, what did we have on Mars and Earth 3.5 billion years ago? You've got essentially an atmosphere. You've got liquid water on both planets. We believe that's basically the atmosphere in particular is powered by volcanism. We believe 3.5 billion years ago, both the center of planet Mars and the center of planet Earth, okay, were geologically active. They were hot enough in their centers so that volcanoes were able to spew gases out into the surface, and that's what formed the atmospheres on the two planets. What changed is Mars is a smaller planet than Earth. It's about 1/10 of the mass. And so we think it cooled down faster. And so at some point, it just got too cool in the center to power what we call active geology. So the volcanoes were turned off. And that's like turning off a tap. That suddenly there was no more additional gas going into the atmosphere. And over the time, we think that atmosphere escaped into space. And so there is an atmosphere on Mars today, but it's about 1% of the atmospheric pressure of Earth. Okay, and so as the atmosphere was lost to space, our atmosphere does two things to keep liquid water stable on the surface of planet Earth. It provides a blanket to keep the surface warmer than it would be if the atmosphere was not there, and that's important. But most important of all, it provides pressure. If you took away Earth's atmosphere right now, that 14.7 pounds per square inch of atmospheric pressure actually keeps the water from spontaneously evaporating. You take it away, it then starts to spontaneously evaporate into the atmosphere and is also lost into space. So liquid water was essentially kept in a stable state by Mars's atmosphere. And when Mars lost its atmosphere, we think several billion years ago, it all then escaped as a gas and then flowed out into space. Some of it actually froze. We can see evidence of that in the soil of Mars. If you dig down in the top 2 meters of Martian soil, there's a lot of ice there. It's about 14% ice by mass. And so that's the, if you like, the relic of those Martian oceans. All right, another quick question from Leslie Walsh. What makes the vibrant colors in that picture of the old flow on Mars? Is it an enhanced image? That's exactly right, Leslie. And thank you for mentioning that, because I often like to explain these images in full. You can actually Google H12 Delta Mars, and you can actually see the original NASA images that just show the colors that our eye would see. And basically, it's a uniform sandy brown. Okay. On the satellite that took that image, there is, in addition to just the basic imaging cameras, there are cameras that can take what we call spectral images, where they disperse the light and they can see the different pattern of sunlight reflecting off different rocks in that image. And that tells you something about the mineralogy, the rocks that are actually down there on the surface. And so the colors you see there are actually color coded by the type of mineralogy, the types of rocks we think are actually making up the surface at each point. Okay. Sherry, is there an astrobiology element to the recent research projects to gather samples of asteroids? Yes and no. Okay, so yes, you're right. There are two recent space missions to capture samples of asteroidal material and bring them back to planet Earth from study. You've just seen OSIRIS-REx on Bennu in the last month, and then there was a Japanese mission called Hayabusa 2. And it's been a while since I was looking at it, but I've forgotten the name of the asteroid they went to. But so now we have two space missions bringing back solar system material for us to analyze. We don't think these are environments that are going to host life. We don't think we're going to detect life in those samples coming from asteroids. But what we do think is that the chemistry of those asteroidal surfaces has been pretty much unchanged since when those asteroids were formed. And they were formed right at the beginning of the solar system, 4.5 billion years ago, okay? So what we're going to learn about is actually what our solar system looked like when it was first formed. And that will tell us then, okay, so those asteroids fell to Earth, and then did those asteroids provide the materials that created Earth's oceans, Earth's water? Did that come from icy asteroids, perhaps? Those are the kinds of questions that we might be able to answer from those asteroidal samples. Right. That was 3 wonderful questions. What about life on Europa? Any plans to go? Not personally. I think I've missed my chance, but yes. Exactly. To answer your question simply, it's a whole other talk. Not so much perhaps life on Europa, but certainly on Enceladus. Okay, these are both icy moons that harbour subsurface oceans. Okay, there are numerous plans being laid to go and visit these moons and learn something about them. Some of the plans even hope to try and collect material and bring it back to planet Earth. But if you have a plan, to go from a plan to a space mission that travels to a location in the solar system and come back takes about 30 to 50 years. Okay, if you just look at all the missions we've sent out in the solar system, that's what it's to do, a big mission to both convince the people to fund it, to get the money, to actually build it, and then the actual travel time there and back. So these are long-term endeavors. But excitingly, looking beyond any one person's lifetime, yes, there are plans to go to these icy moons of the outer solar system and do, if you like, I don't want to say real astrobiology, but to do very pertinent astrobiology, which is to ask, is there anything living there right now? That's quite exciting. All right, 6:59. I always like to keep us on time because we've all got busy lives. Thank you for joining me this evening. It was an enjoy. I always love telling these stories. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to them. I'm going to wrap up now, but we will be back this time next week with another presentation. You'll all get the emails telling you all about it. And And then what was the other thing I was going to say? And of course, everything will be on YouTube. So just search for YouTube UVic Cafe Sci, and you can see this evening's presentation, send it to your friends, or see any of our presentations from over the summer. So thanks again for joining me. It's always great to see you guys, even if it's virtually. And hopefully you'll all join me again this time next week for another presentation. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your evening.